I'd like to welcome people to the Children's Scrutiny panel, the first proper one of this municipal year. We'll kick off with membership of the committee. I'm Andrew Cooper, I'm the chair of the committee. And
I'm Councillor Paul Moore, a new member of the panel.
And we have a number of apologies.
There's Councillor Elizabeth Reynolds, Councillor Richard Smith and Oliver Gibson, Copty. Sorry, did you? Sorry, there's Councillor Elizabeth Reynolds, Councillor Richard Smith and Oliver Gibson, Copty.
And I understand illness and the time of year is some of the reasons behind that. Okay, we'll nip on to minutes of the previous meeting. Anybody want to raise anything? I think we're just here to approve anyway. Shall we approve those, Paul? All those in favour?
Yes.
There we go. Good one.
Neither of you were there.
Well, you know, we're keen to make sure they're approved because that's our job. Interests? I've got no interests on this. Yourself, Paul? No?
No interest.
Okay. Admission of the public. They're welcome if they were to attend. Deputations and petitions.
None received, Chair.
As we have no public, there's no public question time. So we'll move straight on to the performance data and a verbal update on the highlights. So let's have the verbal update, please. Thank you.
Right, do you want me to go first?
Yes, please, Vicky.
So yeah, just kind of key highlights really is that we've seen ongoing reduction in the contacts to our front door and improved timeliness with regards to those. Pleased that we've seen a re-referral rates have reduced again, and we understand the reason for those re-referrals, which are significantly lower than England and our stat neighbours. Also really pleased that the timeliness of our initial child protection case conferences has risen to the highest it's been this year, which is very positive, and children subject to a repeat child protection plan has reduced again. Really pleased to see the numbers of missing episodes and children who go missing has declined, which is positive, and fewer children in care went missing. The numbers of children entering care remain stable, and positively we ensure that children who don't need to be looked after, their plans are progressed, and many of our young people live with their family members, extended family members, in special guardianship order arrangements. We continue to see children in care frequently, and their reviews are held. 98% of those are held on time. With regard to children who are care leavers, 98% of our care leavers have a pathway plan. We're in touch with 94% of them and seen an increase in how many of our young people are in suitable accommodation, which has risen to 92%. We know that we have got some caseloads for some of our workers, which is increasing. We understand where those risks are. We also know that there's more that we need to improve the number of assessments that are done for them to be completed in time, and we're working closely with teams to help them with that. And numbers of children on a child protection plan continues to rise, although this is notably lower than stat neighbours and England. And probably just to say that we see 90% of our children who are looked after in time, and we're working hard to make sure that the health checks for looked after children are completed in time, in particular dental checks for children in care. And that's probably it from me. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for that, Vicky. Paul, anything from you?
Thank you, Chair. Just in terms of the Kirklees children's residential homes, we've seen a decrease in terms of Ofsted inspections from 2018-19 to 22-23, and it's really just to get some information about that downward trend and the causes of it.
Hello, yeah. My name's Anna Gledhill. I can provide an answer on that. So there has been a decline in some of our homes. Actually, in 2 of our homes, we have either improved or maintained the Ofsted judgment, which is really positive. But in terms of some of our residential children's homes, there has been a decline, as you pointed out. We will bring some further details back to the next scrutiny panel. But in summary, I think it's fair to say we've been impacted by a sufficiency and a national capacity crisis that did develop throughout the pandemic. And as a result of that, identifying and securing safe living environments for our children and teenagers, as it is often teenagers in this home, has been increasingly challenging. So as a consequence of this, our children's homes has found that the complexity of risk management needs for our children within our homes has grown significantly. And the issues in the homes that you've referenced as related to demands on staffing skills, their abilities, and our need to maintain and invest in high quality home environments for our children to live in, as well as their partnership response to managing risky behaviour. So to provide some assurance, Children's Services have set out plans to redesign and modernise the children's homes, and the work is underway and it's progressing through due to there's quite a lot of extensive planned work. Improvements will take some time to embed, but there is a modernisation and improvement programme that is being overseen. As I said, though, we will bring some further detail back to the next scrutiny panel if that assists.
Yeah, I think that'd be really useful if we can have a look at, just dig a bit deeper and find out what the problems are.
Okay, thanks for that. If we can have a look at the Ofsted reports, the most recent ones for the children's homes, and the perspective that the council has on those, that'd be really interesting. Another thing which I'd like to do is look at some of the homes and offer some supportive visits to just look at the lived experience of the people who work there and the people who live there, and get some and get a better perspective of how things operate there, which I think could benefit us. And I do want to stress that they would be supportive visits is what I'd like them to be. Okay, any thoughts on that? Is that okay?
Well, I'll come back on that. Nobody else seems to be doing, but yeah, I think that would be very welcome, and we'll make some arrangements about that.
Okay, anything else, Paul?
Yeah, I mean, as a new member, it's just looking at the number of cases per social worker. Is that manageable? How does it compare to a neighbouring authority with a good or outstanding Ofsted? And just to touch on, how many agency staff do we use to kind of plug some of those gaps?
Yeah, that's fine. I can answer that. So Vicky Metheringham, Service Director, Child Protection and Family Support. So just in terms of caseloads, what I'll do is give a little bit of context in terms of the recruitment and retention of social workers, because that's a national issue at the moment, and Kirklees is certainly not immune to this issue. We've been doing lots of work to try and make sure social workers feel valued whilst they're working here. We noticed in January this year that a number of social work posts were becoming vacant. We've analysed those numbers. We know that in our assessment and intervention teams, we've got 19 fewer social workers than we'd like, and in our looked after children teams, 8 social workers fewer than we want. So in March we did analyse that and gave a view that we would seek agency workers to come and work with us. However, we've not been successful in that. That there is a national strategy at the moment and some work that's being done with agencies, because most local authorities in the country, in fact all of them, are experiencing the same issues as we are in Kirklees, which is high caseloads and fewer social workers, and a national issue around recruitment and retention. And there's through the government reforms, there's been a national agreement that the use of agency workers moving forward won't be a possibility. anymore, and there's a consultation out around the parameters of agency workers insofar as the current workers need to have got 5 years post-qualifying social work experience, etc. So it's being taken very, very seriously, because we cannot rely on agency workers who come in, work with our children for a very short period of time, aren't invested in those relationships and don't know those children, and frankly causes us some concern. We did consult with our workforce when we realised the difficulties we were facing in terms of vacancies, and many of our social workers have been with us since 2016 and were very vocal. They didn't want us to go back and use agency workers because their experience of that had been so negative. We're also very clear that we won't breach the Memorandum of Understanding, which is an agreement between the local authorities and the Yorkshire Humber region, insofar as how much we pay agency workers. So to answer your question, caseloads are for some social workers higher than we'd want them to be. We have a weekly caseload meeting with heads of service now. We've got every single individual team. We know how many social workers are in the team, how many children, how many cases are allocated to them, and then how many of those cases are actually numbers of families. And we know that social workers are working with more children than we want, but we have just developed children in need panels and a weekly meeting with our colleagues in early support to look at the volumes of children that don't necessarily need to be open to our service anymore. If we were to take out the numbers of children in need from our service, it would give our social workers in the assessment and intervention team a caseload of 10 based on the numbers of children looked after in their teams and based on the numbers of children on a child protection plan. We think we've got too many children that are open on a child in need plan that shouldn't be. So we are sighted on it. Caseloads are higher than we'd want them to be, but we are doing what we can to ensure staff in Kirklees feel supported, feel that the work's being recognised. We do frequent shout outs. We've done some stress prevention work. We do time to talk sessions where we work with social workers and talk to them about their worries. And basically trying to make it a place in which our staff feel valued despite the pressures that they find themselves under.
Thanks for that. You want to come back on any of that, Paul?
No, just thank you for that. I find a lot of that reassuring.
Okay, thanks. Question from me. When we're looking at the source of your contacts, one thing that's sort of came out to me is there's very low number of contacts that you've had from housing, and that could be, I guess, for a number of reasons, but it does make me think that obviously we have housing staff from Homes and Neighbourhoods who go into homes on a regular basis. They're looking at the environment that children are living in, and though the children hopefully will be at school, I would imagine that there are circumstances where concerns would arise. So I'd like a bit of commentary on that, and also I think something about what training is offered to staff and how many staff actually take up that training on safeguarding. So any thoughts?
Do you want me to start that, Joe, and then you to move into the training?
Yes, please. Joe has nodded.
So just to say that we have a close relationship with housing colleagues through our front door, and we're confident. I'm confident that that through that relationship and through the work that we do jointly, that housing colleagues do understand what their responsibilities are. But I think that it's an area that we will take forward, and I've already flagged up with our team manager and service manager to see if there's anything we can do to assure ourselves that safeguarding concerns are being recognised and then being referred into the front door.
Okay, thanks for that. Joe.
Good morning, it's Joanne Sanders. I'm Service Director for Learning and Early Support in Children's Services. Just to add to what Vicky said, through the Children's Safeguarding Partnership, safeguarding training, there's basic levels and more in-depth levels. It is reviewed across all our partner agencies, of which any sort of colleagues from the council would be involved with. I don't at the moment, but previously I've chaired the Learning and Development Group, and there has been representation there from our homes and neighbourhoods. And I know that training such as toolbox talks are undertaken, but I think we can approach the partnership and the independent scrutineer to look at uptake of that. So you've got some quantitative data as well as some qualitative to bring some assurance. So we'll absolutely do that.
That's great. And so it's the sort of things I'd be interested in seeing is the take-up of training by housing staff, particularly with relation to frontline staff, the people who go into homes. And also, I'd be interested in seeing systematically, you know, what is done to record concerns which may be about safeguarding the environment of the home, things like that, which might make a frontline housing worker look at that. So those are the sort of things I'd be interested in seeing.
Thank you, that's really helpful. I think what we should include in that, as well as just the front door, we do have obviously early support, family support colleagues, absolutely part of that, and environment is key. So we have the multi-agency, early support multi-agency panels. So I think as long as we make sure we bring back the full picture, I think that'd be really helpful to be able to showcase and give some assurance or otherwise. Thank you.
Okay, so the education side of the data, anything, any highlights you want to go through there, Joe?
Thank you. We're coming, obviously, it's now the end of the academic year, so we will be absolutely reviewing the early years foundation stage, key stage 1, key stage 2 outcomes. We'll be able to bring a much fuller picture back to scrutiny in September. But just a couple of highlights reflecting back. Just want to acknowledge the work of our virtual school for children that we look after. They undertake personal education planning and we've got 100% compliance. The team work incredibly hard with colleagues in children's social care, the looked after children's team, to make sure that there's a really robust planning and that their education is secure. We do have a virtual school governing body of which our lead member chairs, and we're able to do deep dives into areas of concern and see where the challenges are and barriers for youngsters. For example, we've had a really forensic look at attendance, in particular persistent attendance. So that's an area of strength. One of the challenges, I think absolutely we've had a really key focus on suspensions and exclusions, looking at that for all children across the district, but then looking at youngsters in different groups. So our children that are in the care, where we are the corporate parent, but also those with an education, health and care plan and those at SEND support. It's hard to get a comparison with statistical or national figures at the moment. The best comparisons we have are pre-pandemic, and it does show that we have seen an increase in the number of suspensions. It is something that's a key theme of our Kirklees Futures, our learning strategy, and we agreed with the Education Learning Partnership Board that will be something that will be a key priority from September. So, far too many suspensions, particularly at secondary. But I think we've looked under the data as to some of those reasons and how they are classified and what we can do to help schools to support that to reduce. So we have some really good partnership working with our schools that we'd like to be able to perhaps maybe look into it a bit more depth with scrutiny as we progress. I think the last scrutiny panel, we did do some national contextualisation around some of the things that we're doing to support that in terms of the recommission of alternative provision, and so there's a good baseline from which to work. But yes, we want that to come down and attendance to improve. And then maybe just one comment about the numbers of education, health and care plans. Those are stabilising, although they are quite high. We've got a higher than national average of youngsters at SEN support, which is a real brilliant opportunity so that we can support those youngsters to be in the right place to receive their education. At the moment, we've got a sufficiency challenge, which I think you'll be aware of, in terms of the rebuild of 2 of our special schools, the fact that we've got 5 new additional resource provisions open from September, and that should start to help us retain more of our youngsters and enable them to be educated locally, which is something that is at the heart of what we want to do. But those are I suppose, the highlights from the education and the early support data.
Thanks for that. And I guess looking back at some of those things on exclusions, what would be really good is to have a look at a range of practice in schools, and so if we could arrange a visit or two to have a look around and look under the bonnet, and again offer some supportive visits to schools to show that we're taking an interest in the work that they're doing.
Thank you. I think we'd really appreciate being able to enable that. I think it'd be really brilliant for Scrutiny to see some of the challenges, but some of the brilliant practice where schools are supporting other schools to improve, and what we can do then collectively to wrap around that. So we'll absolutely make arrangements with you to enable that.
Many thanks. Much appreciated. So now we move to the Cabinet priorities. And we have Councillor Viv Kendrick here. We have Councillor Carol Patterson. So let's see. I'm not going to do eeny, meeny, miny, mo. Viv looks like she's ready.
I'm going to present 3 priorities. There are quite a lot of other things that I have an eye to and I'm concerned with, but these are sort of 3 almost top of the list. And a lot of what's been said by colleagues already this morning actually filters into what I'm going to talk about. So the first priority I want to talk about is achieving a good outcome for the inspection of local area children's services. That inspection is referred to normally as an ILACS. And that to reflect improved outcomes for our children, young people and families. Colleagues in the room will be aware in 2016 we had an inadequate rating from Ofsted, and probably are also aware of the range of many inspections and reviews we've had since in the intervening years. The one thing I can report is the commitment and dedication of the teams and the enormous amount of work that has and is being undertaken to turn this around. And a lot of the data sheets you get are the sort of high-level sort of indicators of that. There's a real desire and passion to do the best for children, young people, carers and families in Kirklees, against a background to reducing resources and increasing demand. So, you know, the challenge, we're not alone. It's a challenge that local authorities across the country are facing. A good ILACS outcome is a goal, but the real prize is the continuing improvement of services. You know, life after ILACS, it's about continuing improvement of services to support Kirklees children and families. And this work isn't just about children's services, it isn't just their task and role. Essential roles are carried out by schools, by the police, by health, by the voluntary sector and other organisations, as well as other services of the council. So that's one key priority I have. I don't know how you want to do this, Chair. Do you want me to talk about the other 2, or have you any questions or comments on that?
Paul, before I do?
No question.
So just on the inspection, I sat in on the staff briefing quietly on ILACs, which was, I think, that seemed to be very positive, and I think it was giving, I think basically asking staff to be open and provide information, and to not be necessarily intimidated by the inspection, but to just explain the good practice. So I was really impressed by that staff briefing. One thing that I do remember from the 2019 inspection, we had a lot of help from Leeds City Council after that, and shortly afterwards Leeds found itself in problems and trouble, and you're thinking, oh, so I mean, one thing that I did notice was that things, what is an exemplar council one year can be a council which is in trouble the next, and so just maybe a few thoughts about how you actually make sure that you don't just up your game, but you keep the game going.
I suppose that's really what I was talking about as such, in terms of it isn't just about passing that inspection, isn't it? It's having things solidly there at the core that will continue on. You know, I am determined we will get there, as I know Vicky and all the folks in children's services are, but it's about the long term, really. We want the right thing, the best thing for children and young people in Kirklees, and there has to be something that is robust enough to continue after an ILAC's inspection. I don't know if you're wanting to come in and comment, Vicky. You suddenly appeared on the screen.
It's just supporting you.
Thank you for that. Anything else on that, or shall I move on? Okay, so my second priority is providing high quality, stable, loving homes for our children and young people locally. And it's a key priority if we are to do the best for children and young people in Kirklees. We do have early help and support for families to assist in keeping families together, and that's the starting point. It should be, what can we do to intervene where things are not going well, to help keep families together wherever possible. We also use foster carers, obviously, for where children have to become looked after, and we do need more foster carers. Recruitment of foster carers, it's an easy sentence to say, it's a terribly difficult thing to do. We need more foster carers, preferably in Kirklees, or at least independent agency foster carers within or near Kirklees. We do put lots of facilities in. We have a good offer for foster carers in terms of support. We provide things like Mockingbird, which is a system where one foster carer sets up a sort of almost community of LinkedIn foster carers and special guardianship order carers, so that where things are getting difficult, they can get support, where young people go and meet each other, they have sleepovers to give a break to foster care. So I suppose what I'm saying in shorthand is we put in a lot of things to support our foster carers, but we do need more. And, we can't compete with the money that the independent fostering agencies pay. And therefore, we end up with their higher charges. But in spite of that, if children were placed with foster carers, whether they were ours or in IFAs, if they were within Kirklees, that would be a huge improvement, rather than some young people going out of the area. The service also, and we're a bit of an outlier in Yorkshire and Humber in terms of we work to support children with other family members where they can't remain with their birth parents, and this is done by special guardianship orders. Far better to stay with a family member than be brought in to be looked after what are complete strangers in the first instance. And, that's a strength that we have, and it's why our number of looked after children are lower than both our statistical neighbours and England and across Yorkshire and Humber, because we work really hard on special guardianship orders. We are creating more residential places for those who need that environment, and we have a well-developed stay and put scheme for where young people on reaching the age of 18, where they and the foster carers want to continue them living there. We support them to do so up to the age of 21 if necessary. And that's, to me, is an important thing. I didn't say to my children, oh, you're 18, out the door. In fact, they've kept coming back over the decades, you know, but there we are. And I suppose I'd end on this bit to say becoming looked after is an enormous challenge for young people. But if that also means being placed out of area, away from everything that's familiar, that you're linked to, that actually is huge trauma in my view. So everything we can do to build what we can within Kirklees is absolutely vital.
Paul?
Hi Viv, thanks for that. Just really to say that you know, again, reassured that there is a robust training and support package for foster carers. In terms of numbers, how many children go out of the area, roughly? Is it, or as a percentage?
I'm hoping, I'm looking at Vicky, I'm hoping she may, I cannot do it off the top of my head.
Yeah, we've got that information. So we've got 598 children in care at the moment, and 162 of our children, 162 of those children live over 20 miles away from the home address. There's another 28 children that live between 20 and 40 miles, another 16 that live between 40 and 60 miles, and another 17 between 60 and 100, with a further 5 over 100 miles away. The context of this is that we know that children in our care will live in a range of settings, which depends upon their assessed needs and plans, as well as the availability of matched homes. But what we know is that we've got a high number of children living within connected carers arrangements. Anna, do you know how many children in total we've got that are living with connected carers? I've shut my other page down with that spreadsheet on. But what connected carers means is that children are living with family members that might not live in Kirklees, but it's felt to be better for those children to live with their family members outside of Kirklees. So we know that's the driving factor to those children's arrangements, and clearly that, you know, that when children do live at a distance, it does impact on social workers' time, because they're visiting children at long distance. It's fair to say that for some children, when it's a permanent arrangement, the care planning regulations do agree that we can visit children at a lesser frequency if that's agreed by the foster carer, the child, and the independent reviewing officer. So it doesn't always mean that social workers are visiting every 6 weeks. It can be that they're visiting every 3 months, dependent upon the child and the carer's wishes.
Thank you for
that. Yeah, I mean, I think 99 times out of 100, I think, yeah, obviously keeping people within the family and locally is the right thing. Occasionally there will be cases where you wanted to remove people from an environment which isn't healthy, and there've been some fairly high-profile ones in Kirklees every now and again where that's occurred. So I guess it's not a hard and fast rule, and I guess we've got to sort of work out when it is appropriate to take people out of their family environments and maybe out of the community.
Yes, I think you're absolutely right. It is, in the end, what is the best thing for the child or young person. And for some young people, it's not safe for them to stay within an area, and there we would look to find accommodation elsewhere that is safe. Or some young person may have special needs that can only be met in another place environment that we cannot provide within Kirklees. It's on a case-by-case basis, but for me, where it's the general thing of a young person becoming looked after, wherever possible, to my mind, it should be within Kirklees for the best for all.
Fine. And your third and final priority?
Thank you very much, Chair. My third and final priority, I'll read out the whole title as we've got it on screen. Ensuring our children and young people and families with additional needs are supported as early as possible and are provided with a new financial support system to meet their needs in their learning environment. So, early help is absolutely key in supporting these families, but also that continuing support needs to be provided when it's needed throughout that child and young person's development. I think it's been touched on earlier in the meeting. Education in local places is important. We are building 2 new special schools, as been talked to replace 2 that we have. They're not in addition. One is to provide better accommodation and probably greater capacity for children with autism. And the other is to increase the capacity for young people with social, emotional and mental health needs, SEMH, which will place a school in a more central site, but also increase the number of places. Currently, it's not, the school that we have is not a designated boys' school, but because of capacity and the special support these young people need, it only has boys in it at the moment. So if you are a girl in Kirklees with social, emotional and mental health needs, if there is a local school that doesn't feel that they can provide for it, they have to go out of area. And the last time I looked, that was 63 girls. When we build this new school in the central site, it can accommodate both boys and girls to that level, which is why it's such a key priority. But we also are adding in additional places at mainstream schools. A lot of colleagues in schools have stepped up, and those places will be things like supported by the special schools with their expertise so that children can be educated locally. I think we all would support that. And alongside those projects are services that we have like multi-systemic therapy, where that's necessary, family group conferencing to help support families to enable children to remain within the family and to be educated locally successfully. And we are in the middle of a development of a new financial system to assist schools in providing the best educational environment for these children.
Paul, anything?
No questions.
Okay. Just 1 or 2 thoughts on that. All good stuff. 1 or 2 things that occur to me is, though it's not just, I guess, our job, it may be our responsibility, but there are organisations, third sector, community sector organisations who are also involved in the support of children and young people outside the school environment. And I guess if I was to say anything, I'd say that we should ensure in partnership with others and recognise those partnerships maybe. Any thoughts on that at all?
I think you're absolutely right. It is a partnership issue, but I mean, I'll call it my priority, but it's a priority shared by many, many people across services and across other agencies and across education. Yeah, you're absolutely right. I wasn't meaning to minimise it just to children's services.
No, and from outside the council as well. Yeah, so aware of organisations that do provide that support. Another thought was, you say children, young people, and absolutely right. And of course, there's children's services, but people with additional needs will stop being children. And so one of the things we've got on the work programme is to look at the transition from young people to adults and how that is managed and handled and so very much agree that it should be children and young people. And I sort of look at this thing and think, to meet their needs in the learning environment and beyond, you know. So it sounds a bit Buzz Lightyear-y, but you know, I think it's that it's not just the learning environment, it's life, I guess, as well.
Yeah, you're right, Chair. I did say these were my 3 top priorities, but what you're talking about transitions is another issue for me that I'm concerned about, along with many, many other things. But yeah, absolutely take that on board.
And what I really liked was the reference to families, because you know, there's a real issue. I mean, I've come across families who've got, you know, obviously it can be quite a strain on mental health and things, with having a child with a lot of demands, and so you know, it is about the families. It's not just about the kids themselves. So I thought that was excellent. Really. Anything else, Paul?
No, I mean, my day job is helping run a community centre in Chickenley, which is quite a challenging area with some of the health and educational indicators. So, you know, I'd welcome that partnership working, because we provide activities during the summer holidays. We have groups in the evenings. I run a weekly youth club where I'm finding increasingly we've got more and more young people with more kind of needs than we had five years ago. So yeah, I totally welcome that.
Okay, I think it's over to you now, Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, Councillor Carol Patterson, and my portfolio covers learning, aspiration and communities, which is the other half of children's services. And like Viv, my 3 priorities are not the only priorities, but they are the ones that certainly are rising to the top in terms of what we need to tackle in the next 12 months. And my first one is very much where Viv and I overlap in terms of our portfolios, but also our priorities. I mean, my first one is ensuring the number of school places matches need, and that schools are supported to meet changing needs. And it is very much, I mean, changing needs. I mean, the demand for school places per se, in some sectors is going down, and in other sectors it's going up. But also, changing needs actually refers to the increasing numbers of children that we are seeing coming through who have got special educational needs and a need for special education as a result, which Viv's already been talking about. So in terms of finding those school places that match their needs, I suppose the biggest priority just at the moment is finding those places for children with special educational needs, both in the longer term via the 2 new schools that we've built, we're building when I say in-house within Kirklees, which is to the benefit of all, but also more importantly, I mean, we will have 5 new satellite provisions come September for children with special educational needs in different schools, and we're looking at establishing more of those throughout the year. It's a continuing process now where we're looking to provide those additional places. So it's all about providing that support that actually does meet the needs of children. But also, schools are also facing big challenges, either because their number on roll is falling, which is across the primary sector, that is the case. You know, there are not so many children being born, and therefore the number of school places within the primary sector is falling off, which for many schools is providing or proving a big problem in terms of the accommodation that they've got, because it's too big, but costs still to maintain. The number of staff they've got, which perhaps is now over an oversupply of staff, and that again costs. And schools are only funded, you have to remember, by the number of children on roll in any one particular year. So if the funding drops off, there isn't the money to pay staff. For some schools, it's not an easy thing to react to very quickly either. I mean, if you've got half a class, for instance, that you still need a whole teacher, and you won't necessarily, you have to find ways of juggling the classes that you've got to match the staff that you need, and certainly in the very short term. In the longer term, if numbers are still going down, then that's easy. You haven't got half a class, and you can actually get rid of a whole teacher, perhaps. I mean, get rid sounds a bit draconian, but so it's not an easy job to react to these changing numbers in the very short term, and that's causing financial problems for schools as well. I mean, and with the cost of living crisis as well, in terms of maintaining their buildings, it's a big problem for a lot of schools, especially our small schools. And then, of course, the secondary schools, we have still got a bulge of places or school children going through their years. So they, at least on a temporary basis, are needing extra accommodation, extra staff. Secondary schools obviously are larger than primary schools, so it's not such a difficult proposition for many of them to adapt to the change in numbers each year. But it's still the same issue in terms of finances, because the finance, whilst it reflects the number of children, it lags behind for a whole year. So it again, in the short term, it causes problems, as does particularly, obviously, accommodation, finding additional accommodation, which you may only need for 2 or 3 years, because we know in the future that's going to revert back to smaller numbers. So it's a legal responsibility of the local authority to find school places for every child, and be it in an academy or a maintained school or special school or wherever. And so we really need to have to help them get through this interim period, and it is not an easy job to do, especially in terms of with the cost of living crisis as we have it at the moment. I mean, building new schools or extra accommodation, I mean, it is fraught. If we do have to do that, it's absolutely fraught with problems in terms of the construction industry and all things like that. So that's my first one for the moment.
Okay. Paul, anything on that?
So with all this additional provision that you're talking about then, in the sort of medium to long term, are we on course to meet that need, especially for people with special educational needs?
Yes, is the very short answer. I mean, it's not an easy job, and I know one school will only be receiving a porter cabin, basically, the day before term starts this September, that they need. So we're really up to the wire on it, but it will be there. They will have all the rest of the resources that they need, but that is not a good situation for any school to be in. But they will have the accommodation that they need. I mean, when I say porter cabin, it's not just it's a bit better than something that workmen hang their clothes up in or whatever. It's fully equipped and with all the facilities that you need and desks and all the rest of it. But yeah,
desks and everything. Oh, great. One or two thoughts on this. We've got a priority here which has a lot of things in it which are beyond our control. We do not control the birth rate. People do that themselves in one way or another. We also have the issue of parental choice, which I have a personal view about, which does mean that people are more fluid in terms of where their children can and cannot go. We have even schools which are in LEA control. They've got an awful lot of autonomy anyway through the governing bodies, some of which will have people on it who've got a fair bit of knowledge, skill and background in education, some of whom went to school once, like me. So there's an awful lot of things here which are I guess, beyond our control. And my question would be, is when we're doing our planning for these places, how do we involve the schools in that? How do we actually involve the people who are going to be at the receiving end of whatever it is we decide to do, and how we go about it? Because they're the recipients of our wisdom in some ways, and they're the ones who will have school places or not. One of the areas that has been brought up with me, I think you know, in the past, is head teachers who said to me that provision of that new school has had an impact on the numbers coming into my school. And so whether that's right or wrong, I suppose the question is how do we involve schools in effectively in making sure that how we approach this priority is done in consultation with them in a meaningful way?
That's a big question. I mean, and there's there's a really long answer to all of that. I mean, the short answer is yes, schools are involved. I mean, you can't do it without them. But to break that down, there's all sorts of different things I could respond to. But just one of the things, I mean, there is an annual consultation that goes out to all schools. It's a statutory consultation, in terms of the number of places that the pupil admission numbers that they are going to work to in every year of the coming year of years. So I mean that's a very, I wouldn't say simple, but that's one thing, regular thing that does happen every year. In some ways we have a lot of notice of numbers of children. We start looking at the numbers from the actual birth rate as they are actually born, and then predict as best we can how many school places are all told, but the areas in which those school places may be needed. There is there's a whole admissions team that works on this all year round, looking at the number of children, including parental choice as well, because we're very aware that some schools are oversubscribed and others undersubscribed. I mean, there are vacancies in a few schools because parents choose not to put them as first choice, though they may be their local school. There's an awful lot of place planning, just number crunching that goes on the whole time. There's an awful lot of discussion at that very basic level, really, with heads, with parents, about, I suppose, operational individual matters and things like that. But when it actually comes to making changes, it's so there's just so much to it, and it goes on for years often. I think Joe wants to come in here, but yeah. So
we absolutely have to co-produce this. We're not in the business of telling people, although there's statutory decision making. We publish annually, as Councillor Patterson has said, a place planning, a sufficiency document. That's both for statutory school age. It also includes childcare, and there's lots of changes coming through the childcare sector at the moment. And what that does, it gives you lots of factual, very detailed information about all those things, as Councillor Patterson said, around preferences, parental preferences, where youngsters live versus where they go to school. And there's a really lovely summary that explains the factors that affect demand and the factors that affect supply. And we absolutely try and encourage everybody to engage with that. And then we will have conversations as part of the Education Learning Partnership Board that Councillor Patterson is chair to. That's made up of representatives, head teacher representatives, governor and academy trust leader representatives. There is a subgroup, and it's called the Places Access and Inclusion Committee. And again, head teachers, admission authorities that do some more detailed work in analysing. And I do think there's some very difficult conversations to be had about making sure we've got enough of the right stuff, but also when sometimes we might have more than we need. That's what Councillor Patterson's explained. Sometimes when we have more than we need, we have to have those conversations about matching need with demand. So we've got to keep reviewing it, and I think we do that regularly, and there's that real opportunity to use that great baseline to help have some of those conversations we need to have. Make sure we've got resilient schools and education institutions for our youngsters, because that's what gets great outcomes. So I suppose it's that assurance. We couldn't do it without our partners in schools.
Okay, just one or two thoughts on that. It's a competitive environment, isn't it, for pupils? In that, you know, there's schools who are basically saying, "Come to our school. Don't go to that school because we're better," and so that there will be a certain amount of that going on. Well, they might not say don't go to that school, but they would certainly be blowing their own trumpet. I'm quite sure. And I'm aware of one particular school that has got a marketing strategy, and it turned around, you know, a difficult financial position and made it a good financial position because of the marketing strategy it had for the school and all the elements that it did. So I do wonder whether some of the role of achieving this priority is about providing the tools and sharing some of the best practice among the schools more widely. And but having said that, some of the schools might not want to share that practice because it's you know, yeah, absolutely. Thanks for that, Councillor Kendrick. That's appreciated. So yeah, that's just me. I don't know if that's a question or just me musing, but any thoughts on that? Is a competitive environment, is it necessarily a good thing?
I don't think it's competitive like it once was. That you might have once. I mean, I think when parental choice first came in, it was perhaps very competitive. We haven't. When I did actually say there's some schools which have got spare places. We haven't actually got many schools with spare places. So that schools are full on the whole, because we do manage those places. It doesn't help us to have vacant places across the whole school system. It doesn't help us, it doesn't help schools. So that competitiveness, I mean, yes, schools want to be good and they want to be, get good Ofsteds and things like that. But most schools actually don't need to market themselves, not in that sense. I think you're suggesting. I mean, because they've built up a good reputation, they are oversubscribed, and unfortunately, not all kids get to go there. They get their second choice or their first choice. And also, the other thing is that we do find. I mean, I suppose. Some schools get children from out. I mean, we have place planning areas. And which are quite large. I mean, they're not necessarily catchment area. They're their own small catchment area, or is it the other way around? Anyway, we have some schools where, actually, I think there is one school I think I can name where, I won't name, but where not one local child goes to it, but they've got lots of people coming in from elsewhere. Which, I mean, I suppose you could say they do want to maintain their viability. They do need to market themselves, but I don't think it gets to the point where they actually have to go out and advertise for people, because they're relying on past reputations now, which not necessarily bad reputations. I mean, good reputations which are correct, but I mean there are. I mean, I think I can understand where you're coming from with your question about marketing and why you may be asking that, because that it will apply in some schools, but I don't think it's people are competitive to get a good Ofsted perhaps, but not necessarily to have a marketing ploy to get I mean, they're not going to say we've got great basketball pitches, come on, well, they might, but I mean, they're not going to say, yeah, come to our school because of our basketball pitches, that sort of thing.
Okay, Joe.
I think there's, you know, it's palpable, the spirit of collaboration. School-to-school improvement is a government expectation, and it's alive and well across Kirklees and beyond. It's about how do we share good practice, and that's what is underpinning. I do think schools absolutely want to celebrate their successes. So, and, you know, sometimes there can be challenging circumstances, sometimes, you know, more often than not, actually, it's celebrating success, and that's about pride in for our young people to feel proud of being educated in Kirklees, and that's certainly the spirit in which we operate. And we do try and use some of those opportunities to share best practice and give support around where there might be something that needs some communication support, whether it's marketing. You want it to be an attractive environment, but I think it's far more, I see collaboration, witness collaboration, professional generosity. There's some brilliant practice to be shared around groups of schools working in local areas, in, for example, in the Murfield area or the Batley area, where they're working together to meet the needs of families and youngsters, and they're really proud of that approach. So I think there's some opportunities to have a look at that in a little bit more detail. But yeah, I think it's about, let's celebrate the good stuff that's happening and working to amplify what we describe sometimes as buried treasure. We're leading the lights at a lot of our schools, and how best do we share that? Some really good stuff.
Thank you. I'm conscious we've just looked at one priority and you've got two more to go. Kirklees Futures, tell us about that, please.
Right, I mean, in some ways, you know, the discussion we've just had actually covers almost all the rest of, well, no, my second priority anyway. But because our Kirklees Futures is our learning strategy, which we launched in 2001, yeah. It'd been in development for quite a while before that, but of course the pandemic came along and interrupted things, or sort of made us focus elsewhere for a while. But it was launched in 2001, and it's meant to cover the years up until 2030. But things are changing so fast, aren't they? We never dreamt that there would be this sort of the cost of living crisis, for instance, when, or even dare I say, the Ukraine war, etc., when we were developing our Kirklees Futures. So the basic vision and our obsessions, which it's all based on, they haven't changed, but our ability to achieve the vision, that's what's changed, and that's why it does need a review. Well, its delivery. It's not the actual strategy that needs reviewing. It is the delivery of that, to make sure we are still on track in the end for 2030. Because as we've already talked about, exclusions. That's one of our vision is that by 2030, no child will be excluded from school. Every child will be in attendance at a school appropriate to their needs and receiving the best education that's available to them. And that, it's always been said, but you can't learn if you're not at school, can you? So, let alone any other implications of that. So, and exclusions have risen recently. I think that is partly, it's across it's a national picture where exclusions have risen. It isn't just our area. And I think that is partly due to the pandemic and home learning and lack of socialisation, lack of there's a word for it, structure in people's lives, which determines behaviour, etc., etc. And you know, that has changed, and that's to make sure we get on top of our exclusions in time, or not as quickly as possible. Then we do need to, as I say, review the delivery of the learning strategy and how it's happening. We've been holding, we've held a couple of what we've called summits or conferences each year so far, where we've looked at one aspect of the strategy. This year it was transitions, which I think was something we were just talking about earlier. Transitions between phases and sectors in schools, in the school system, and we will be continuing to review the delivery in that way, plus other ways, of course, as well, in the future. So, I mean, well, in terms of I'll stop there.
Okay. Thanks for that, Paul.
No questions.
Just one from me, really, about exclusions. I guess if we had the power, we could make it that true tomorrow, couldn't we? We could say, right, no school exclusions. So that's our policy now. But I guess that's not necessarily winning, is it? That's not winning. That's just there are occasions when, quite rightly, I guess sadly, children should be excluded from school. So I guess the question is I guess what's the plan to achieve it, and how robust will it be? And that sounds like a big question to me. That genuinely does sound like a big question. So I don't necessarily want you to answer it now. So is it possible to the question is, does such a thing exist? Is there a plan to achieve no exclusions by 2030? Is there such a plan?
Yes, there is a plan, or there's an action plan to help achieve it. I mean, sorry. I mean, there is an action plan behind all of the different aspects of our vision. I mean, so yes, there is an action plan. We can't actually. It would be foolish, even if we could, I think, to say to schools, "Thou shalt not exclude." It's not. We have to work with schools to enable them to achieve. I mean, because it is in their gift to a certain extent in the end, as to whether or not or how they deal with issues of, because it's not, well, and I say, it's not always actual sort of just bad behaviour. There are different reasons why a school might want to look for alternative education for a child.
And we have got exclusions coming to the next panel meeting.
Yes.
So let's not overanalyze that, Joe.
Yeah, I think it'd be helpful to bring it back as holistic. It has to be an ambition. There's a real emphasis and impetus for some of our children that are looked after. There's a presumption. It's a government set presumption that you don't exclude those youngsters, and that doesn't happen without an awful lot of professionals wrapping around. So part of the ambitions, the obsessions in our Kirklees futures, it is absolutely up for debate, but it's about getting the right pathway. So if a youngster has got some particular needs or something happens, how do you create the right pathway without the need to exclude? So if we can do it for children that are looked after, and put all that emphasis, then I suppose the question is, what will it take? And that is, like you say, it's a big debate, and it's, so I suppose this isn't the council's learning strategy. This is the district's learning strategy, and there's some rub within that, but I think there's some real opportunities, particularly with some national changes that are coming online for things like attendance, exclusions, expectations, and yeah, so I think it's going to be a really interesting area to look at, which is why it's in, I think that review, like Councillor Patterson says, make sure that we're doing that implementation plan in line with the context. Thanks.
Yeah, I mean, as Joe just said, I mean, the interesting thing is that our looked after children, there is zero exclusions. And you might think that possibly, I mean, a looked after child might be more in danger of being excluded from school, but the work that the virtual school, plus the individual child schools that put into maintaining them in a setting is successful, and we have no exclusions, and I mean that's something that we can be very proud of. But what we need to do is to make sure that support for children is there for every child, not just for looked after children.
Thank you. And your third and final priority?
Okay, well, my third and final priority, isn't necessarily actually relating to children. Well, it doesn't relate to children's services. It relates to community services. But because it's the other side of my portfolio, but I always see that there is a link between the two sides because I think that resilient children, which is one of the things, and that's a theme from our Kirklees Futures Learning Strategy, creates resilient communities, which will be to the benefit of all. But so, I mean, I've only briefly said, but my third priority is working with women and local organisations and understanding their lived experience to drive culture change and ensure services respond appropriately. We've got the Mayor of West Yorkshire's one of her priorities this year is violence against women and girls. It's certainly one of my priorities, and it's part of our community strategy, partnership strategy, is to do something about violence against women and girls. But it's become also too apparent more recently, perhaps, and I'm not quite sure why, but it's not just about tackling that violence and the symptoms of domestic abuse or street violence or harassment, whatever that is. However, that lived experience of women and girls transpires, there's something underneath all of that. We've been looking at symptoms, I feel, for far too long, and there's something beneath it all, which is about the culture, and it is about men's behaviour. So often we do blame women. I mean, if a woman is harassed or raped, or we can say things like, well, why does she go out dressed like that? What was she doing out on her own? I mean, we shouldn't be asking those questions. We should be saying, what is it? Why did that, usually a man, do that to a woman? And that's the problem that we really need to address. And we're looking at introducing some sort of pledge from all our services in Kirklees and our partners, be it the health service or the police. The police have all, are well aware of this priority, and also all our voluntary organisations, anyone that we work in partnership with across our partnership board. A pledge to actually do something about the culture within their organisations to ensure that there is a proper response from their services. We're all well aware, I think, of national, at least. I do believe it doesn't actually apply so much locally to our own police force, but nationally, the culture in police forces has been appalling when it's come to the treatment of women, either as victims of violence or just generally in terms of how they treat their staff, etc., etc. I do think, I will say, I do think our local police are better than what we've seen described nationally. So that's what that last one's about.
Okay, Paul. Anything? Okay, so on that last priority, is there a plan, a Kirklees plan to achieve that priority? Is there something we can look at and go, that's the plan?
Yeah, we are working on that at the moment. I mean, it's as I say, we're thinking about introducing this pledge, and it's part of there will be an action plan around that. I mean, that is what we're working, and that's why it's my priority at the moment.
So it's coming, but it's not here.
It's not well. The action plan isn't here yet, though we have got the Inclusive Communities Framework, of course, which deals with that.
So when's it going to be something we can look at?
Well, we've just talked about it at the last partnership meeting. It will be reviewed as we review our next spring, when we review our priorities again. When it will actually, we haven't got a timescale on it. We haven't got A, B, C, D in terms of a timescale, but certainly within 12 months or something like that.
Oh, it's going to our Overview and Scrutiny Management Committee. All right, okay, that's great, thank you. That's the priorities. Thank you, everybody, for that. So, next item we have is pre-decision scrutiny. The panel will consider any areas of pre-decision scrutiny in accordance with any cabinet decisions relating to children and young people that are on the horizon. So, is there anything on the horizon that we need to consider? Councillor Kendrick.
Yes, I've got an interesting thing in terms of it. I'm not quite sure why it's within my, well, I am, but it's really transport related, and it's looking at what we do about post-16 home to school transport for special educational needs young people. It's costing us millions that we haven't got, and there are some plans and proposals that I think, whether it's appropriate for this one, overview and scrutiny or whatever, I thought at first, if we've got to make savings as children's services, this will help, but it won't. It'll help transport, not us. But we seem to be doing the work on it, but there we are. So I think that should be looked at as we go along. I've had some initial meetings, and I think there's some more in my diary, but I will raise that as to when we've got a plan on a page, that it comes here.
Thanks. And my perception is we've known about this issue for a long time, and it's been something that's been hovering around, smelling for a long time. Is that your perception as well?
Yes, it is. It's sort of what on earth can we do sort of feel from the past, and now somebody's saying there is something we can do, hopefully that is right and equitable for the young people and their families, but also for the council too.
Councillor Patterson, you want to come in on this as well?
Yeah, I mean, again, this is one that crosses both our portfolios. But yes, it's been an issue for a long time, but it's one that's been manageable for a long time. But it's become unmanageable in terms of, because of the cost of living crisis, etc. I mean, fuel's gone up, wages have gone up. And so we've had to have a more forensic look in the way that we have managed the issue, and to find ways of managing it and keeping it within budget, because we haven't got the demand. Well, there's an increased demand for it as well, and we've got to deal with that demand in the best financial possible, best way financially that we can, but also for the best outcomes for the children. And really, we don't want to be sending kids miles away. We want them to go to their local schools.
I've just had a quick look. I've just got a quick look on the work programme. I don't think we've got it in our work programme, and perhaps we should have it in our work programme. So I think there's a way we can bring that in. Yeah, this is a crucial issue for the council in terms of the money side of things. It's huge, and it doesn't look like it's in control.
When you say it doesn't look like it's in control, you mean?
It's out of control.
No, I don't think it's out of control, because actually we're working on changing things and developing things. It won't be easy, but I understand what you say, but it's not been on my radar in the past. It suddenly is on my radar.
Fair enough.
I think there's probably just a couple of areas as well to complement what Councillor Kendrick has said in terms of on the horizon. I think we've obviously got youngsters' outcomes. There'll be A-level, GCSEs, and it is something that we usually like to engage with yourselves upon. The progress of our youngsters. We're keen to bring that as soon as possible. Absolutely feeds Councillor Kendrick's and Councillor Patterson's priorities in terms of our Kirklees futures. Are our priorities the right ones for the district? So that's on the horizon, and then there will be some decisions that we'll be asking Cabinet to take that support the SEND transformation plan and sufficiency. For example, as Councillor Patterson has acknowledged, we have an ambition to invest in more additional resource provisions and satellite provisions to make the space suitable. We need to make some investment into a school environment. So we need to make sure that we've got the appropriate decision making in place. It won't be there currently, but because we are still in train, but there's that huge piece of work, and we will be anticipating being able to bring some updates as well to Cabinet about the rebuild of the 2 special schools. Again, it's a really fantastic opportunity so that Scrutiny can see how that's progressing, how children's voice is influencing those new buildings, and how you can see that we're on track. That's really crucial for us in terms of, I suppose, our financial and aspirations for youngsters to be educated locally. So there are some on the horizon that we'll be keen to bring forward.
Sorry. Shall I start again? To add to what Joe said, support and challenge. We've recently, because we have no improvement monies available to the authority, we've had to look at a new way of helping schools to improve and to challenge them to do that. And we've been consulting with them over the last couple of months, and we've now just come to an agreed scheme or way of how we are going to support individual schools to help them improve in the future. It will start to take place from September. So it'll be too soon to bring anything, I think, in September, but perhaps later on in the year when we've seen how it's working and how successful it's been, it might be something worth looking at then.
Thank you. Right. Anything else on that before we move on? Okay, gone. So feedback from panel members on issues considered by the Corporate Parenting Board. I know I was unable to attend I think I was on holiday actually during the Corporate Parenting Board, unless it was on a Monday, and I can't do Mondays. So I've got no feedback to offer from that. So anything anybody wants to say about the Corporate Parenting Board? No. Okay, go on, Councillor Kendrick.
Just to say, Councillor Reynolds regularly attends, and were she not ill today, I'm sure she will give feedback, and I think she'll catch people up. It really is people coming along and observing and their perception, really, rather than me saying as chair, we did this, we said that, sort of thing.
No, normally, if it wasn't a Monday, I would make an effort to attend. I can't remember whether it was Monday or not, but
Tuesdays normally.
Tuesday, right? I was probably on holiday. It was lovely in Wales actually at the time.
Oh,
there we go.
Well, I'm glad to hear.
Thank you. Okay, so that's that item. Just go over the work programme and agenda plan. I think there's one or two things that we've identified that we want to add. Home to school transport, I think it's one of the things that we want to add in. Other things that came up under the priorities are things that we're considering later in the agenda anyway. So I think most things that you talked about in terms of your priorities are things that we're looking at in any case, either with this committee or through the management committee. So it's okay. Anybody want to bring anything up under the work programme? Councillor Kendrick.
I just wondered, I mean, with the licence for the care home in Dewsbury comes in August, but we're hoping that Magdale, which is the new, it's not a new build, it's a conversion of an established property, we're hoping will be in the autumn, September perhaps. I just wonder at some point if scrutiny members would like to come and have a look at that and talk to the team that are going to be working there as well.
I believe that was something we talked about doing a visit earlier on, but I can't see it on here, but it's probably because it's not part of the meeting schedule. We're looking at it as a visit. I seem to be piling up visits for us, which there we go.
Chair, I have to say, I find it helps me look at the data I see on bits of paper to get the truth. I'm only one person, Carol's only, scrutiny members doing that in different places and feeding back gives me information and helps us continue to be confident or improve.
Yeah. And actually it's what makes the job of being a councillor interesting, is actually looking at the stuff and seeing what happens. So that's the fun part, actually, in some ways. I don't think we should necessarily promote it as being fun, but you actually get to understand how things happen, which is very interesting at least. Okay, so nothing more on the work plan or work programme or agenda plan. So this meeting is over for today. Thank you everybody for your contributions. It's been much appreciated. I've learnt a bit more than I did know, so that's excellent. Okay, thank you very much.